Hey everybody, it's Rocket here. I am showing my face because I don't have a Wii U capture card, which I'll explain in a moment, and I just wanted to get something off of my chest while it was fresh on my mind, so there's going to be some random sounds of life going on in the background. I want to talk about open world games, but specifically the protagonist in open world games, particularly in RPGs. Now, there's two kinds of open world RPG protagonist. There's the kind that you see in, say, Deus Ex, where you've got Adam Jensen in Human Revolution. It's not technically open world, but it's non-linear enough because there's different styles of gameplay, and you're always able to make decisions about the kind of character you're playing, even though the character you're playing is already established. Adam Jensen is a character that was created by Square Enix and Eidos, and you had no part in the creation of that character. And then there's the kind of character that you play in Skyrim or Fallout or Dragon Age or some other equally just blown wide open game where you create everything about the character, starting from their appearance and their name and whatever abilities they begin with. So for Christmas, I got Xenoblade Chronicles X because I loved the idea of a massive game world with a single-player MMO type gameplay style. I found the combat to be really interesting, and there's just going to be some minor spoilers here. I'm just going to talk about stuff that happens within the first hour of the game. So the first location you visit after you go through a brief tutorial is this human survivor city. And you meet some people while you're there, and the first thing that they try to do is they try to press gang you into becoming a blade, which is an acronym that stands for some not very badass title, but basically you're a hero who's fighting for the survivors and helping them to survive and complete whatever missions they have. So these two characters that you meet, I'm not even going to go into their names or the details about them right now, are giving you a tour of the military side of the city because they really want you to become a blade. One of these characters wants you to become a blade so badly that the entire tour, the entire explanation of every stop that you arrive at on the tour is just filled with all this propaganda about how awesome it is to be a blade, how cool they are, how cool the giant robots that they have access to are, how you would have to be stupid or crazy not to want to be a blade. Keep in mind that this part of the tour happens after you get introduced to the head of the military for the human survivors, and he's talking about how important blades are because obviously he's in charge of them and in charge of directing the efforts to find some other human survivors elsewhere on this planet. And I could sense this psychological build-up happening. You know, the game is trying really hard to convince me to become a blade. It's like, I'm seeing this from this odd perspective because Xenoblade Chronicles X is one of those games that lets you build your protagonist from the ground up. I worked at making my character look the way I wanted him to. I gave him his own little name, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be just like Skyrim or Dragon Age, and I will get to make all my own decisions. So obviously, I'm not going to be forced to become a blade, right? It was especially bothersome because while all this propagandizing is happening from this character who really wants me to become a blade, there are these things that keep getting said like, don't worry, the decision is completely voluntary. The decision is completely yours. We're going to ask you to become a blade. It's going to happen, but you get to say no. This is told to you explicitly multiple times throughout the course of this tour. So when the tour ends, you return to the military barracks where that commander guy is waiting for you, and you know he's going to pop this question of whether or not you want to be a blade, which he does very quickly because apparently his superior really wants you to become a blade as well. At this point, I'm like, alright, I'm really starting to wonder if I'm actually going to have a decision to make here or if I'm going to get shoehorned into becoming a blade. I'm a huge metagamer, and when I see a situation like this, when I see a situation where I have had total power over who my character is, and I'm given an important decision, I still think, okay, there's going to be a path that the characters, the NPCs, like in this instance, will want me to take. The characters will want me to become a blade. but the game will still have provisions for me to decide not to become a blade. If I decide not to become a blade, maybe there's some way I can go rogue or become some sort of freelancing mercenary, and I can eventually still get access to those giant robots that everybody's so excited about, right? Wrong. But the way in which the game shoehorns you into becoming a blade, it really pissed me off, I'm going to be honest, but I'm too impressed with the way they handled it. You see, if you've played Pokemon or any so-called RPG like Pokemon, where you'll be asked a yes or no question. Do you want to become a blade? Do you want to help save the village? Will you take up the responsibility of saving the world from this massive evil? You say no, you'll get some stupid canned response that says, oh, please, won't you reconsider? And you will be unable to progress in the game until you select yes. If you keep selecting no, it's going to keep saying, please, won't you reconsider? Please, won't you reconsider? The game has reached the end of its logic. Nothing is going to happen until you admit to defeat and say, yes, I'll be the hero, I'll save the world, I'll be the blade. But this guy, this military character, actually has multiple lines for when you say no. You say no, and the camera zooms in on his frowning face, and he starts to ask one of the other NPCs a question, and you know it's leading into a guilt trip, which the character that he's talking to then references. Is this all part of the guilt trip? That's a question that she asks him when he reacts in the way that he does. And you can say no again. If you say no a second time, then his second response will be to try to turn your no into a yes by just trying to play a mind game with you. And if you say no a third time, he has yet another response. Now, after this third response, if you continue to say no, this is where he turns into a Pokemon NPC. He will keep giving you that final response. But what amazed me was how hard the game tried to get me to say yes before it actually asked me the question. And then even when it did ask me the question, it wasn't going to give up. It was going to continue to try to convince me without running into that dead end that the Pokemon NPC runs into. Won't you please save the world? Won't you please save the world? Won't you please save the world? I had my roommate comment on how that's kind of stupid, and you know what? I agree. I think that when you have total power over your character from the beginning of the game, I think that should be setting a precedent that you get to make all the important decisions for yourself. But at the same time, if you take a simple choose-your-own-adventure book, for example, it's like the simplest iteration of the role-playing game. You decide which path you want to take, and it's nothing but words on a page. You only have so much time to write out new pages for that choose-your-own-adventure. And what that means is that ultimately, no matter how hard you try, the choice that's given to your readers, to your players in a game, is ultimately going to be limited. And I don't know how important it is that I become a blade. I don't know why they decided not to include a path that would allow me to go rogue and flee the city and try to acquire a giant robot by illicit means. But whatever their reasoning was, whatever the developers' reasoning was, they decided that, well, no matter what happens, it's important to the narrative that our player becomes a blade. So we're going to force them to do it, but we're not going to be shallow about it. We're going to try to psychologically trick them into wanting to become a blade. And they had all the tools, just in their defense. They had all the tools necessary and ready, and they were being creative about it, because they're basically saying, you got to go through this arduous process to get a giant robot. You have to be a blade to get a giant robot. You have to be a blade to get all these public services in the city, and to buy from the armory, and to hire underlings at the scouting board, and to take missions, and to do all this cool stuff. In the end, it doesn't matter. I have to become a blade. I just said yes, and that military guy was like, I knew you would make the right decision. And I just laughed my ass off. There's not really an ending statement to this. I just thought it was worthwhile to point out the way in which Xenoblade Chronicles X actually handles this dilemma of player choice that they don't actually want to exist, because they took the illusion of actually having a choice farther than I have ever seen a developer take that, and I think that's something to be admired. That said, it is December 30th at the time of this filming, and I have a lot of stuff I want to get to before the end of the year, so I bid you a happy 2016. This is Rocket Ethereal, signing off.